Hi, shalom, friends. If I asked you what was your gut reaction to this question that I'm going to pose, are people today more giving or more considerate or perhaps more charitable than they were 150 or 200 years ago? Now, of course, I don't have any statistics, and there are many ways to describe goodness and compassion and charity, but let me present a possibility. And I would say unequivocally, today people are much more charitable, much more generous, in fact, and to a certain extent, much more spiritual than in the past. Let me back this up. The average kid today, and certainly thinking young adult, takes recycling very seriously. Honestly, they're really very serious about this. In fact, some people are so concerned about their carbon, I think they call it their carbon footprint. So they actually think about maybe alternative ways of travel. Certainly, many people are using bicycles and scooters instead of gas guzzling cars. You ask them why. And the answer, very, very, very sincerely is, well, the world is running out of resources, and we're concerned about the future. And just stop over here. We are concerned about the future. Here's a person who's not thinking about himself. He's actually thinking about the future. He's thinking about the world. He's thinking about what's often used as, what will the grandchildren have or great-grandchildren have? So, are you impressed? To a certain extent, I am. I think it's like, wow. An average person is not only thinking about himself, but he's thinking about the impact that he has on the wider community, on the country, and in fact, in the future. Yet, you contrast that with an anomaly. The anomaly is when people, the expression is, act individually, think globally. When they're thinking globally, they're completely neglecting the most obvious, which is the individual. Let me strengthen this with a story that happened maybe 35 or 45 years ago in Israel. There was a traditional young lady from, I believe she was from Morocco, and wonderful, we'll call her Chana, very wonderful girl, intelligent and pretty and this and that, and she had one thing, which was her desire to help people. And as she was maturing, she was thinking, what profession can she choose that would enable her to help most people? And she came up with the idea that she would become a doctor specializing in pediatrics. Very noble, very, very, very beautiful. And she had the mind that went together with her personality, and she got into medical school, and she was really dedicated to her studies. She was also desirable, and she fell in love with a fellow, and they get married, and it's a wonderful story until they reach this bump in the road. She was taking birth control because she was focused on her education, but things happen. Perhaps she forgot, something happened, she became pregnant. Husband was very excited about this, but she took it with trepidation. How can I actually take a break to raise my child after childbirth when I have this crazy schedule of hours and hours of study and lecture? So she told her husband, I think we'll just abort. And the husband, of course, was very distressed about this and said, you can't. This is our baby. That's number one. Number two, it's also against everything that we believe in. We're traditional Jews. We're not very observant, but Jews don't kill babies. And she said, look, I'm a doctor. It's not yet a baby, this and that. And they had their discussion/argument. And the conclusion was that she would go to a very respected rabbi who's a third party and simply ask, are they permitted? So she shows up in the doorstep by Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach of blessed memory, one of the great halachic deciders of the 20th century. And she comes to the rabbi who's having his hours, and she says, Rabbi, can I abort the child? Now, obviously, the rabbi was astute and understood that it's not a simple question because just about every traditional Jew in Israel would answer, of course you can't. It's wrong. It's against the Jewish tradition. So he asked, why are you asking the question? She said, I'll tell you why. Because I really want to be a doctor. I'm on my second or third year, whatever it is, of study, and I just don't have the time. Plus, it's going to, there's morning sickness and all kinds of stuff. And this is going to put me either off the track for maybe a year or perhaps even longer. So the rabbi plays like a simpleton. He says, why do you want to be a doctor? She says, Rabbi, because I want to help people. So he says, well, there are many professions you could use to help people. Why? And he says with a joke, even being a salesperson, you're helping people. She said, no, Rabbi, come on. It's not just helping people. I mean, I am really helping people. I could save lives. So the rabbi says, you could save lives, but not always does a doctor save lives. Sometimes he makes mistakes. Other times, it's not that serious. She said, Rabbi, you're avoiding the subject. A doctor is trained that to help and to cure, in a sense. And it would be worthwhile for me even to spend 6-7 years for me to become accredited, even if all I could do is save one life. It would already be worthwhile. To which the rabbi looked at her and said, listen to what you just said. You're willing to spend all of these years with hard dedication to save even one life, and you have that opportunity right now. You could save the life of your unborn. The presentation, I didn't say it as well as he did, but the presentation was so powerful that, of course, she took a leave of absence and she had a child. But here's a question for you, dear listener. Why didn't she see it that way? And the most obvious answer seems to be she was focused on the many and forgot about the individual. She was thinking about the babies in the future that she would help, but simply overlooked the fact that she had her own baby to take care of, her own baby to raise, her own baby to bring in to this world with beautiful life. We Jewish people, we grow up with the Chumash, the Bible. The first Jewish couple, if you could call them Jewish, was Abraham and Sarah. Now, Avram means the father of a great nation. Sarai or Sarah means princess. In our tradition, and there's no secret about this, Avram and Sarah are equal partners. And as Abraham teaches, so does Sarah. In the words of Maimonides, this couple, he focuses on Abraham, but it's a couple. This couple brought tens of thousands of people closer to the true belief of monotheism, of one God and one Creator. So if I were to ask you, going back some 4,000 years ago, who is the most popular teacher amongst women, it would be, without a doubt, Sarah. And if I asked you who was probably the busiest woman on earth, it again would be Sarah, who was not only a loyal partner and companion to her husband and helping him, but in her own right was a teacher par excellence and had, without exaggeration, influence, real influence, daily influence over perhaps thousands of people. Okay. When you read the story, what do we find? Sarah wants to have a child. And you ask yourself a question. She had so much going. She was so busy. She was so accomplished. She was doing such important work. Why is it that she wanted that child so desperately? Well, I can't answer it directly, but let me point out an observation. What happened to the thousands and thousands of students that Sarah influenced? Where are they? What happened to them? Strangely, the Bible doesn't talk about it. It would almost seem that after the charismatic teachers of Abraham and Sarah, they either melted away or assimilated. But her child Isaac, or Yitzchak, what happened with him? Everyone knows. He married Rivka, and they had Jacob. They had 12 tribes, their grandchildren, and the Jewish nation comes from Yitzchak. Isn't that remarkable? Thousands of students, constantly busy teaching about God, and nothing remains, at least from our knowledge. But the one child that she has changes the world and perpetuates their legacy. Which one had a greater effect on the world? The many students or that one child of her essence? Well, it's that one child. They often say and repeat the teaching of one of the great rabbis of Israel, who said, when I was young, I was so idealistic that I was convinced that the way my teachings would be heard would actually change a world. He says, as I grew up and I began teaching, I realized that changing the world was a little bit beyond me, but I certainly hoped to change my country. And as I'm continuing in my path of teaching my students, I realized, who am I kidding? Change a country? But I certainly hoped that my city would be following in my path, in my teachings. But I realized that I was not being successful. So I said, okay, let me concentrate on my community. When I wasn't given the proper attention, I concentrated on my family. And they too did not seem to respond until I said, if there's anyone that I can change, it's me. So I stopped thinking about changing the world. I began focusing on changing myself, transforming myself. And to my surprise, when I changed myself in that process, my family was influenced. And as my family was changing, they had an influence on our community. And as our community was changing, it changed the atmosphere of the city, and so on and so forth, until one person changed the world. So friends, I'm not going to disagree with act individually, think globally, but I will remind us that don't forget what's primary. It's our family, it's our self that can and should be enhanced. And by doing so, we will be able to accomplish great deeds. Thank you.